For more than 50 years, the world watched Carol Burnett step onto a brightly lit stage, smile her warm and unforgettable smile, and make millions of people laugh until their sides hurt. At the end of every show, just before the credits rolled, she would gently tug her left earlobe and wave goodbye. To most viewers, it looked like a cute habit, something playful and harmless that made her feel human despite her superstar status. But that small gesture carried a meaning so deep and personal that very few people ever understood it. It was not done for the cameras, the audience, or even for the network executives. It was done for one person only, the grandmother who had raised her when her own parents could not. That tiny movement was her secret way of saying, "I love you. I'm okay." It was a silent message sent through television screens into the heart of the woman who had saved her life. Long before she became the queen of comedy, Carol was just a frightened little girl growing up in a small, struggling apartment in Hollywood during the 1940s. While movie stars lived glamorous lives only a few streets away, her reality was very different. She lived with her grandmother, whom she lovingly called Nanny, in a cramped space where every inch mattered. Money was always scarce, and sometimes there wasn't even enough to keep the lights on. At night, they would leave the closet door open so the hallway light could shine in, offering a tiny bit of comfort against the darkness. For a child, that faint glow felt like safety in a world that often seemed uncertain and overwhelming. Her parents were not cruel people, but they were deeply troubled. Both struggled with alcoholism, a disease that slowly took them away from her even while they were still alive. She watched as the people she loved most changed into strangers, lost inside their own pain. It forced her to grow up much faster than other children. She learned how to read the room, how to calm tension before it exploded, and how to use humor as a shield. Making people laugh became her way of surviving. If she could make the adults smile, maybe they wouldn't argue. Maybe the chaos would pause, even if only for a moment. Movie theaters became her escape. Sitting beside her grandmother, she would watch musicals and comedies and imagine a life filled with happiness and applause instead of worry and fear. Those films gave her hope that a different future was possible. She began to dream about being on stage one day, making people laugh the way those actors made her laugh. But dreams felt dangerous when you were poor. They seemed like luxuries meant for other people, not for a girl from a struggling family. When she was accepted into UCLA, it should have been the happiest moment of her young life. Instead, it filled her with dread because she knew she could not afford it. Tuition felt like an impossible mountain blocking the path to her dreams. She tried to hide her disappointment, but inside she was terrified that her chance at a better life was slipping away. Then something happened that would change everything. Something so unexpected that it almost sounded like a scene from one of the movies she loved. At a small performance where she had been entertaining guests, a wealthy stranger approached her afterward. He told her he saw something special in her, something rare that deserved a chance to grow. Without asking for anything in return, he handed her an envelope filled with money, enough to travel to New York and begin chasing her dream. But he made her promise 3 things. She must never reveal his identity. She must use the money to pursue her career, and if she ever succeeded, she must help others the way he had helped her. With shaking hands and tears in her eyes, she agreed. That envelope was more than money. It was belief. It was proof that someone saw her potential even when she doubted it herself. Boarding the train to New York was one of the most frightening things she had ever done. She was leaving behind everything she knew, the poverty, the pain, and the fragile safety of her grandmother's presence. Yet she carried something new with her, hope. New York City was loud, overwhelming, and full of competition, but it was also a place where dreams could come true. She did not fit the traditional image of a glamorous actress. She was tall, expressive, and unafraid to look silly if it meant getting a laugh. Instead of trying to change herself, she leaned into what made her different. Slowly, people began to notice. Her talent was impossible to ignore. Even as success started to grow, she never forgot the frightened girl she once was. The ear tug remained her quiet connection to home, a reminder of the love that had carried her through the darkest times. Fame would eventually bring awards, admiration, and a place in television history, but it could never erase the scars of her childhood. Those experiences shaped her into the performer the world adored, someone who understood pain deeply enough to transform it into laughter. Behind every joke she told was a story of survival. Behind every smile was the memory of a little girl who once sat in a dark apartment, hoping for a brighter future. And behind that simple ear tug was a message that traveled far beyond the stage lights, reaching back through time to the woman who had believed in her before anyone else did. When Carol Burnett arrived in New York City, she carried more than a suitcase. She carried years of struggle, quiet determination, and a promise to herself that she would not waste the chance she had been given. The city was intimidating at first. The streets were crowded, the buildings seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, and the competition was fierce. Every theater was filled with hopeful performers chasing the same dream. There were moments when she wondered if she truly belonged there. But each time doubt crept in, she remembered her grandmother's faith in her and the stranger who had changed her life with a single act of kindness. She refused to give up. Her early days were filled with auditions, rejections, and tiny roles that barely paid enough to survive. She performed in small clubs, sang in revues, and took whatever work she could find. Sometimes she would walk for hours just to save bus fare. Yet even in those difficult moments, she discovered something important about herself. She had a fearless comedic instinct. She wasn't afraid to look silly, make exaggerated faces, or throw herself completely into a joke. Audiences responded to that honesty. They sensed that she wasn't pretending to be funny. She simply was. Her big breakthrough came on Broadway with the musical Once Upon a Mattress. The role allowed her to showcase everything that made her unique: her powerful voice, her physical comedy, and her ability to connect emotionally with the audience. Critics praised her performance, and suddenly the girl who had once struggled to afford college was becoming a star. Broadway opened doors that had once seemed locked forever. Television producers began to notice her, inviting her to appear on popular programs where she quickly became a favorite guest. Television in the 1960s was a male-dominated world, especially in comedy. Variety shows were led by men who controlled the format and the tone. When Carol suggested that she host her own variety show, many executives dismissed the idea immediately. They told her audiences wouldn't accept a woman in that role. Some suggested she stick to playing supportive characters or comedic wives. But she had spent her entire life proving people wrong. Instead of backing down, she pushed forward with confidence. In 1967, her persistence paid off when CBS agreed to give her a chance. What followed was television history. The Carol Burnett Show became one of the most beloved programs ever broadcast. It wasn't just funny. It was warm, unpredictable, and deeply human. Each episode felt like an invitation into a family gathering where laughter came easily and nothing was taken too seriously. Carol stood at the center, guiding the show with a mixture of grace and playful mischief. One of the most iconic moments in television comedy came when she parodied Scarlett O'Hara, descending a staircase wearing a curtain rod as part of her dress. The audience erupted with laughter, and the scene became legendary. It perfectly captured her genius. She could transform high drama into pure comedy without cruelty. She wasn't mocking the original story. She was celebrating it in her own hilarious way. Her co-stars, including Harvey Korman and Tim Conway, shared an incredible chemistry with her. They often struggled to stay in character because they were laughing so hard themselves. That authenticity made viewers feel like they were witnessing something spontaneous and real. It wasn't just a performance. It was joy happening in real time. Saturday nights soon belonged to Carol Burnett. Families gathered around their televisions, knowing they were about to share an hour of laughter together. In a decade filled with social change and uncertainty, her show offered comfort. She wasn't edgy or cruel. She was kind. Her humor felt safe without being boring, clever without being mean. She had created a space where people could forget their worries, even if only for a little while. Yet fame came with its own pressures. The public saw her as the perfect entertainer, cheerful, approachable, and endlessly strong. Few realized how much effort it took to maintain that image. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly, rewriting sketches, rehearsing late into the night, and carrying the responsibility of an entire production on her shoulders. She wanted every episode to be worthy of the audience's time. Despite the exhaustion, she never lost sight of why she had started. She remembered the lonely child who had used humor to survive and the grandmother who had sacrificed everything for her. Every laugh from the audience felt like a tribute to those early struggles. The ear tug at the end of each show remained her private ritual, a quiet acknowledgement that success had not erased her past. Awards began to pour in. Emmys, Golden Globes, and countless honors confirmed what audiences already knew. She was a legend. But the greatest reward was not the trophies. It was the knowledge that she had broken barriers for women in comedy. Young performers who once felt invisible now had proof that they could lead, create, and succeed on their own terms. By the mid-1970s, she was at the height of her power, admired not only for her talent but for her integrity. She had achieved what once seemed impossible, rising from poverty to become a symbol of laughter for an entire nation. To the outside world, her life looked perfect. She had fame, respect, and a career that would be remembered forever. But life rarely stays perfect for long. Even as she stood on top of the entertainment world, challenges were quietly approaching. Challenges that would test her strength in ways no stage performance ever could. The applause was loud, the spotlight was bright, but shadows were beginning to form just beyond the edges of the stage. At the height of her success, when Carol Burnett seemed untouchable, a storm began to form that no amount of talent or fame could stop. To the public, she was the woman who made everything feel lighter, the performer who could turn even the worst day into something bearable. But success often attracts scrutiny, and the brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadows behind it. In the mid-1970s, when her show dominated television and her reputation was spotless, a tabloid decided to challenge that image in the cruelest way possible. The publication was the National Enquirer, known for sensational stories that blurred the line between truth and fiction. They printed a claim that she had been seen drunk and causing a scene in a restaurant while arguing loudly with Henry Kissinger. For many celebrities, such gossip might have been embarrassing but temporary. For Carol, it was devastating. The accusation struck at the deepest wound of her childhood, the pain caused by her parents' alcoholism. She had spent her entire life avoiding alcohol, terrified that the same addiction could take hold of her. To be publicly labeled as drunk and out of control felt like having her past thrown back at her face. Friends and advisors urged her to ignore the story. They warned that fighting a tabloid would only give it more attention. Lawsuits were expensive, stressful, and rarely successful. But Carol was not willing to let the lie stand. She understood that her reputation was not just about her career. It was about everything she had survived. If she allowed this story to remain unchallenged, it would feel like surrendering to the very demons she had spent her life resisting. So she did something almost unheard of at the time. She fought back. She filed a lawsuit for libel, determined to prove that truth still mattered. The legal battle was long and exhausting. She had to relive painful memories, answer intrusive questions, and face the possibility of losing. Yet she refused to back down. In the courtroom, she was not the comedian who made audiences laugh. She was a woman defending her dignity. When she finally won the case, it became a landmark moment. The victory sent a message that even powerful media outlets could be held accountable for falsehoods. For Carol, it was not about money or revenge. It was about reclaiming control of her story. She had faced down a giant and emerged stronger, proving once again that resilience was her greatest strength. But while she could defeat lies in the press, there were battles she could not fight with lawyers or public statements. Behind the closed doors of her home, a far more personal struggle was unfolding. Her eldest daughter, Carrie Hamilton, was beginning to show signs of the same addiction that had destroyed Carol's parents. Watching it happen felt like stepping into a nightmare she thought she had escaped. The fear was overwhelming. She knew how powerful addiction could be, how it could transform a loving person into someone almost unrecognizable. This time, however, she refused to stay silent. Instead of hiding the problem to protect her image, she chose honesty. She spoke publicly about her daughter's struggle, hoping that openness might help break the cycle of shame that often surrounds addiction. It was a risky decision in an industry that valued perfection, but she cared more about saving her child than maintaining appearances. The approach was painful but necessary. She practiced what experts call tough love, setting boundaries and refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when it broke her heart. There were sleepless nights, tearful confrontations, and moments when she feared she might lose her daughter forever. Yet beneath the fear was unwavering determination. She had spent her life fighting for survival, and she was not about to give up now. Slowly, signs of hope began to appear. Carrie started to recover, rebuilding her life piece by piece. The mother and daughter who had once been locked in conflict began to rediscover each other. Their relationship transformed into something deeper, built on honesty and mutual respect. They even collaborated creatively, turning their shared experiences into art. It was a healing process that brought them closer than ever before. For a brief time, it seemed as though the worst was behind them. Carol allowed herself to believe that love had triumphed, that the curse of addiction had finally been broken. She watched her daughter step into her own future with pride, seeing not a fragile survivor, but a strong, talented woman ready to claim her place in the world. Yet life has a way of rewriting even the most hopeful stories. Just as peace began to settle in, a new tragedy was quietly approaching, one that no amount of strength or determination could prevent. The woman who had fought so many battles was about to face the most heartbreaking challenge of her life, a loss that would change her forever. The laughter that had once filled her world would soon be replaced by a silence so heavy it felt impossible to escape. And once again, she would have to find a way to survive, not as a performer, not as a public figure, but simply as a mother whose heart was breaking. For Carol Burnett, the hardest role she would ever play was not on a stage or in front of a camera. It was the role of a mother watching her child suffer in ways she could not control. After years of struggle, her daughter Carrie Hamilton had fought her way back from addiction, rebuilding her life with courage and determination. Their relationship, once strained by pain and fear, had transformed into something strong and beautiful. They were no longer just mother and daughter. They had become best friends, creative partners, and each other's source of strength. Together, they worked on projects, including a deeply personal play based on Carol's early life, turning memories of hardship into something meaningful and healing. For the first time in years, Carol allowed herself to feel peace. She watched Carrie laugh again, dream again, and step confidently into her future. Seeing her daughter healthy and hopeful felt like a miracle. It seemed as though the long, painful chapter of their lives was finally closing. But life, unpredictable and often cruel, had another twist waiting, one that no one could have prepared them for. In 2001, Carrie was diagnosed with lung cancer that had spread to her brain. The news arrived like a thunderbolt, shattering the fragile sense of happiness they had built. After surviving addiction, after fighting so hard to reclaim her life, she was now facing an illness that could not be reasoned with or overcome through willpower alone. Carol was devastated. She had spent years learning how to fight addiction, how to support recovery, how to be strong in the face of chaos. But this was different. There were no strategies, no boundaries, no tough love that could fix it. All she could do was be there. Hospital rooms replaced television studios. Instead of applause and laughter, there were quiet conversations, whispered reassurances, and the constant hum of medical machines. Carol stayed by her daughter's side, holding her hand, reading to her, and trying to remain strong even as her heart shattered. She would later describe those days as the most painful of her life, a slow realization that love alone could not stop what was happening. Carrie faced her illness with remarkable courage. Even as her body weakened, her spirit remained bright. She worried more about her mother than herself, trying to comfort the woman who had always been her protector. In their final conversations, they spoke openly about fear, love, and the possibility of saying goodbye. It was an honesty that came from knowing there was no time left for denial. In 2002, at just 38 years old, Carrie passed away. The loss was unbearable. Carol, who had spent decades making the world laugh, found herself in a silence so deep it felt suffocating. The house that had once been filled with conversation and creativity now felt empty. Grief became a constant companion, appearing in quiet moments and unexpected memories. She later admitted that losing a child is a pain that never truly fades. It simply becomes part of who you are. Yet even in those darkest days, there was one memory that gave her comfort. Shortly before her death, Carrie had promised that she would find a way to send a sign, something to let her mother know she was still present in spirit. At the time, it sounded like a hopeful attempt to ease the fear of separation. But after Carrie's passing, Carol began to notice small moments that felt too meaningful to be coincidence. One day, while sitting in a restaurant overwhelmed by grief, a stranger approached her table and silently handed her a bouquet of birds of paradise, Carrie's favorite flower. The gesture was unexpected and strangely specific, leaving Carol in tears. She could not explain it, but it felt like the message her daughter had promised. Whether it was coincidence, kindness, or something more mysterious, it brought her a sense of peace she desperately needed. Over time, she learned to live with the loss, though the ache never disappeared. She returned to work occasionally, not because she wanted to be in the spotlight again, but because performing reminded her of who she was before grief consumed her. Laughter, once her shield against childhood pain, now became a way to honor her daughter's memory. Carrie had loved seeing her mother perform, and continuing to do so felt like keeping a part of her alive. Friends often described Carol as remarkably strong, but strength did not mean she stopped hurting. It meant she kept going despite the pain. She spoke openly about her daughter whenever she could, sharing stories that captured Carrie's humor, kindness, and talent. In doing so, she ensured that the world would remember not just the tragedy of her death, but the beauty of her life. As the years passed, Carol entered the later chapter of her own life, carrying both her achievements and her sorrows with quiet dignity. She had survived poverty, family addiction, public battles, and unimaginable personal loss. Each experience had shaped her into someone far more complex than the cheerful figure audiences saw on television. Yet even after enduring so much, her story was not finished. In her twilight years, she would face another challenge, one that echoed her own childhood and forced her to step into a role she thought she had left behind forever. Once again, she would be called upon to protect a child from the same darkness that had haunted her family for generations. And once again, she would choose to fight, proving that even a heart broken 1,000 times can still find the strength to love. Now, in the quiet twilight of her life, Carol Burnett spends more time reflecting than performing. The bright studio lights, roaring audiences, and endless rehearsals have been replaced by stillness. A stillness that allows memories to surface with both warmth and pain. When she looks back, she does not just see a legendary career filled with awards and standing ovations. She sees a long road of survival, marked by moments of joy and devastating loss. Fame gave her a platform, but it never protected her from the hardships that shaped her story. One of the most difficult challenges came in her later years, when the shadow of addiction returned to her family once again. Her youngest daughter struggled with the same demons that had haunted previous generations. Watching history repeat itself was heartbreaking. It forced Carol to confront a painful truth. No amount of success could erase the patterns rooted deep within a family's past. But instead of surrendering to despair, she chose action. She stepped forward to protect her grandson, determined that he would not grow up surrounded by chaos the way she had. Filing for legal guardianship was not an easy decision. It meant exposing private struggles to the public and admitting that the cycle she had fought for decades was not completely broken. yet also showed her extraordinary courage. Even in her late 80s, she was willing to start over, to become a caretaker again, to do whatever was necessary to keep a child safe. In many ways, she had come full circle, becoming the kind of protector her own grandmother had once been for her in that small Hollywood apartment so many years ago. This final act of devotion revealed something essential about her character. She was not defined by her fame, her talent, or even her tragedies. She was defined by her refusal to stop loving, even when love meant sacrifice. The public might have seen a comedy icon, but her family saw a woman who never stopped fighting for them. As she speaks openly now about her life, she often admits to one lingering regret, that she could not save everyone she loved. Losing her daughter Carrie left a wound that will never fully heal. She has said that she would trade every award and every achievement for just a few more minutes with her. That confession strips away the image of the untouchable star and reveals a mother whose grief remains as real as it was on the day she said goodbye. Yet alongside the sorrow, there is gratitude. She is grateful for the laughter she was able to bring into the world, grateful for the opportunities she was given, and grateful for the people who stood beside her through every chapter of her journey. She understands now that happiness is not the absence of pain, but the ability to find meaning despite it. Her legacy is not just a collection of unforgettable sketches or historic television moments. It is a reminder that resilience is possible even when life feels unbearable. She showed the world that humor can coexist with heartbreak, that strength can live alongside vulnerability. By sharing her struggles openly, she gave others permission to acknowledge their own. Today, when people remember her, they often think first of the laughter, the iconic performances, the playful sketches, the warmth she radiated through the screen. But those who look deeper see something even more powerful, a woman who refused to let tragedy define her, who kept moving forward no matter how heavy the weight on her shoulders became. In interviews, she sometimes returns to the small gesture that became her signature, the tug of her ear. What once was a secret message to her grandmother has grown into something universal. It symbolizes connection, gratitude, and the quiet strength that carried her through every storm. That simple motion reminds us that behind every public figure is a private story, often far more complicated than we imagine. As her story comes to a close, it leaves behind a lesson that reaches far beyond the world of entertainment. We cannot choose where we come from, and we cannot prevent every loss or hardship, but we can choose how we respond. Carol chose laughter, not because her life was easy, but because it was hard. She chose to turn pain into something that could comfort others. In doing so, she transformed her own survival into a gift for millions of people she would never meet. Her journey proves that even in the darkest moments, light can still exist. It may appear in the form of a joke, a memory, a kind stranger, or a child's future worth protecting. As long as there is love and the courage to keep going, hope never truly disappears. And so, the woman who once stood before millions each week, smiling through her own hidden struggles, leaves behind more than a legacy of comedy. She leaves behind a message that no matter how broken we may feel, we are not alone, and our story is not over as long as we continue to rise. The applause may fade, the curtain may fall, but the echo of her laughter and the strength behind it will endure for generations to come.